Church. We're coming to you live on Good Friday, April the 2nd, 2021. I'd like to direct your attention to the cross. About the same time of day as these things were happening a couple thousand years ago. It says, as they led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. And two other men, both criminals, were also being led out with him to be executed. This is part of the Jewish tradition of the Day of Atonement, that there were two goats that were sacrificed on the Day of Atonement. One was released out into the wilderness, the scapegoat, carrying the sins of the people away from the city. So Jesus was being led out of the city through the Damascus Gate out to the hillside we know as Calvary. And when they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And the people stood there watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." And the soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." And one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence? We are being punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." 3 men died that day. They were crucified side by side outside the walls of Jerusalem at a place called Golgotha, the Skull Hill, where the Romans did their killing. It was located not far from the Damascus Gate, so the people going to the city would have to see the executions. Oftentimes, the Romans would execute on the main highway or at the crossroads to get the maximum visibility. Jesus of Nazareth hangs on the middle cross, and 2 men were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Question is, who were these guys? The translations use different words to describe them: thieves, robbers, malefactors, bandits. Luke's word means members of a criminal class, professional criminals, members of the underworld. These men were hoods, thugs, cutthroat killers, men who killed for profit, assassins. Some writers suggest they were political revolutionaries bent on overthrowing the yoke of the Roman rule. If so, we ought to think of them as terrorists who thought nothing of using violence to achieve their political aims. Beyond this, we know so little about these 2 men. We don't know their names. We don't know their hometowns. We don't know the specific crime they committed. We assume that they were partners in crime, but it's not certain as to whether they were brothers. There's just no way to be sure. We would not even know about them except for this: they are supporting players in the greatest drama of all time, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It may appear that the 2 men were exactly alike. They were both criminals being executed, sentenced on the same day together, at the same place, at the same time. Both had been severely beaten before they were crucified. Both were stripped naked before the jeering crowd. Both were covered with blood and dirt. Both men were dying, and both would soon be dead. No one could look at them and see any difference. But in reality, these 2 men could not be more different. The 2 men who were crucified on the outer crosses differed in one major point: how they viewed the man in the middle. They saw him differently and therefore asked for different things. One man wanted escape, not forgiveness. The other man wanted forgiveness and not escape. So let's take a closer look at the man who wanted forgiveness. Was any man ever in a more desperate situation? Being crucified, he's dying in agony for crimes he's committed. He's a guilty man, justly punished. He deserves to die, and he knows it. By sundown, he will be dead. His case has been tried, the judgment announced, the sentence carried out. All purely legal avenues have been exhausted. The man is close to death as he can be and still is alive. Then at the moment near his death, he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I submit to you that this is one of the most amazing examples of faith in all the Bible. Jesus is hanging next to him, a bloody mess, a sight awful to behold. The man's feet and arms are nailed to the cross. Ropes hold his body upright so it won't fall off. Every movement is agony, every breath torture. Beneath him and behind him, the howling mob screams for blood. They jeer, they hiss, they curse, they spit. They roar like wild hyenas. They cheer as he coughs up blood. They shout with approval when someone aims a rock at his tender flesh. It is garish, hellish, brutal, and inhuman. Yet it is here among the blood and the gore that this man comes to faith. Somehow the thief saw Jesus bleeding and naked and yet believed that he would someday come into his kingdom. He saw Jesus at his weakest moment and still he believed in him. He is a crucified sinner trusting in a crucified Savior. And no man ever looked less like a king than Jesus did that day, yet this man saw him as he really was. And it's even more amazing to me when you consider this man had none of the advantages of the disciples. As far as we can tell, he never heard Jesus teaching by the seashore. He never saw Jesus heal a sick person. He never saw Jesus raise the dead. He knew nothing of Jesus' parables, never saw one of his miracles. This man missed all the outward signs of Jesus' kingship, yet he believed. He knew nothing of the virgin birth. He knew nothing of the Old Testament prophecies. He knew nothing of the conversation with Nicodemus. He knew nothing of the raising of Lazarus. He knew nothing of the coming miracle of the resurrection. He knew nothing about anything except on the cross, the thief looked to Jesus beside him, and he said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This man had never said grace, but now he was looking to Jesus to find grace. We would call this an 11th hour salvation. I have an uncle, and the uncle was not a man of faith. He was vile and vulgar, and many times in his lifetime I had witnessed to him. His wife called me upon his passing, asking if I would do his funeral. As I drove up to Pennsylvania to do this, I was actually regretting the whole event. I was dreading being in the presence of people talking about this relationship I had with my uncle and what I believed to be his destiny. It was there that a family relative said 3 weeks before he passed, I was able to go to his room. And there I shared my faith, and I shared with him the gospel. And your uncle came to faith. In the 11th hour of his life, my uncle said something like the thief, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This man has done nothing wrong, the man said. He put faith in the person of Jesus. Remember me, he put faith in the power of Jesus. He said, Jesus, remember me. He put faith in the mercy of Jesus. And when you come into your kingdom, he had faith in the kingdom of Christ. He, that very day, would go into the presence of the Lord because he looked to Jesus. He looked away from his sin. He looked to Jesus, and he believed. Even at this hour, you can put your faith in Jesus and say, remember me when you come into your kingdom.